How's it going, my friend? It is Danny here from projectmaniverse.com, real world technical project management for beginners. And in this video, I'm going to explain how to settle important decisions. I'll explain what I mean by an important decision, and I'll tell you why it's important you know how to do this as a technical project manager. And then I'll give you something of a tool to be able to do this efficiently and effectively. So first of all, what do I mean by important decisions? Well, I've explained this briefly in another video when I've talked about a decision log, a project decision log. So as you go through your project, you're going through your project life cycle, there'll be some occasions where you have to make very important decisions. And they're important because these decisions will impact the project, either in terms of cost, quality, or time frame, and they can change the direction the project is going in a significant way. So there are important decisions, and when they're made, you capture them in a decisions log. So that's what I mean by a important decision. And when I say how to settle them, I'm talking about how to influence or get your senior stakeholders, the people that have to make these decisions, to decide, and not just decide, but decide as quickly as possible. So that's what I mean, because these decisions can't be made by you as a project manager. You don't have that power because they're so impactful. They need to be made by senior leaders, often an exec or a project sponsor or a group of people like a steering group. So that's what I mean by these important decisions. And it's important you know how to do this as a project manager for several reasons. I've already touched upon the first point, and that is these decisions are very impactful. So they will change the course of change the direction of your project. So you need to understand this and be able to influence in the right way where possible. Also, often your project can be, or certain aspects of your projects can be blocked if a certain decision is not made. So it pays to be able to get these decisions made quickly and resolve them so you can move on with your project. What else? Yeah, you will often find that sometimes the outcome of the decision will make your life or the people on your team's life easier or harder. So it's important that you can influence those stakeholders in the right way. Similarly, you might find that the right or wrong decision will add risk to your project. So you really want to make sure you're doing the best for your project, you're doing the best for your team and yourself, and you're increasing your chances of a successful delivery. So you need to be able to get these decisions made and get them made in the right way, and also be able to influence these stakeholders to make the right choice. Okay, so I've talked about what I mean by these decisions. I've told you why it's important that you know how to do this as a project manager. So let's go on to the how. How do you actually do this? Well, it's quite simple, and you want to be efficient and effective when you do this. And bear in mind that these senior leaders don't often have a lot of time, so they don't have a lot of time to read reams of documents to make the decision. They want to see the options in front of them quickly, have it explained to them so they can often make a decision there and then. So the first thing you want to do is pull together an options paper. And if you can do it on one page, one PowerPoint slide, that is all the better. So how do you do that? Well, first of all, you need to think about what the options are. Try to have more than 2 options if possible. 3 or 4 is ideal, but try and have more than 2 if you can. But don't go too crazy. You don't want too many options, otherwise it's going to slow things down. So just pick out the best ones. If there are some options that are just too drastic to be seriously considered, I wouldn't always advise putting them in the options paper as one of the main options, but sometimes what you can do is just put a note at the bottom of the slide to say that you have considered that option, but you've discounted it because of X reason. So that way, when you have your meeting and you go through these options with your senior leaders, they don't question and say, why didn't you think of this? You can say, well, we did think of that, but it just wasn't the right thing to do. It was too much risk, or it's too much cost, or whatever. So you can discount that. But it just shows that you've done the work in the background to think about that option. So that's your first thing. Get the options on your slide and put this in a table. And on your left-hand column, you want the options: option 1, option 2, option 3. And yeah, as I say, try and have more than 2 if you can, but 3 or 4 is about ideal. Don't go crazy with this. Don't have too many, otherwise it will take forever to decide. So that's the first thing you do. The next thing you want to do is do some kind of visual impact assessment. So every option will have an impact on various, what's the word I'm looking for, on various factors, let's say. And there are some generic factors that you can use and always consider when you do these options paper. I'm going to run through those now. But what you want to do is put those categories or factors across the right hand side. So on the left, you've got all your options. On the right, on the x-axis, I suppose, you've got your impacts or your categories of impact. And for each of those, you want to assign a RAG status. And a RAG status means you're assigning either green, amber, or red. So a red impact is not good, that's the worst one. Green impact is great, there's no real impact, so we don't have to worry. And amber is somewhere in between. So for each of those categories, you want to RAG what's the impact of that option. And the general categories that are often used, I'll go through them now. First of all is cost. So what's the cost to your project? What's the additional budget going to be in terms of money? We're talking here, some options are very, very expensive. They could be, hundreds of thousands, could be tens of thousands. I don't know what your project budget is going to be at the time you're making your key decision, but if your project budget is $1 million and this option is going to cost you an extra 50k that hasn't been accounted for, then that is pretty significant. So you probably want to flag that as a red impact in terms of cost. So that's category number 1. What is the cost to the option that you're considering? Number 2 is the impact to people. And there's various lenses to look at this in terms of impact to people. It could be the impact to the resource on your team. Do you have the right resource to actually deliver the option? Or it could be just a morale kind of tangibility thing. Are people going to accept this? Are end users going to accept this? Are they going to have buy-in for this option or solution? So you want to RAG that one as well. What's the impact to people? If you're dealing with customers, for example, and the decision you're making could impact the end customer, you've got to think about that as well. Is this going to impact the end customer in a negative way? Is it going to impact their experience of the thing that you're building? If there's no impact, put it green. If there's a big impact and a negative one, put it as red. Okay, the next one is operational impact. So once you go live and you put this decision in place and you're operating your product in the live environment and you built it, is there going to be any additional overhead in terms of going forward with this option? Are you going to need, for example, let's say the option was to do a workaround for a defect that you could not fix. So your system is supposed to do something, it can't do it, you've raised a defect in testing, you don't have time to fix it, so you could go live with a workaround. So someone has to do something manually in the background. Now, is that going to require more people in the operations? Is it going to take an extra person to run that workaround? So that's your operational impact. Is it going to impact anything in your live business and usual procedures? The next category is complexity. The option you're going for, the option you're considering, how complex is it? Is it very complex? Because the more complex a solution, the more chances of things going wrong, and often the more costly it is as well. So the more simple and elegant your solution can be, the better. So again, if it's very complex, you want to RAG it red. If it's quite straightforward and simple, you do it green. Last one is impact to the design. So as you go back through your documentation, you can pull out your design document. And often when we do design documents, we often have design principles. If we can't design and capture every single element of the design and the solution there, we'll often have general principles that everyone has to follow, especially if it's a massive program of work and we want to keep things consistent and aligned in terms of design, but there's so many areas you just can't cover everything in one document. But often have design principles, and often a solution may compromise those design principles. So we can do it, but it's going against what we said initially in terms of how this whole thing should be designed. So that causes inconsistencies. So you want to avoid compromising your design principles if possible. But that's another category to consider. So if it's a big compromise, you want it red. If there's no compromise, you keep it green. So that's pretty much the category. So we've got cost, we've got people, we've got operational, we've got complexity, and then we've got design. So if you rank those and you have your red, amber, greens, and you've got your options down the left and your categories of impact on the right, and you color code it nicely, you can pretty quickly see which of those options is going to have the least impact or the most negative impact. So if it's all green, if one of those options is glaring out as mostly green, that's probably the option you want to go for because it's got the least impact. But if you've got a lot of red on one, you want to avoid it. So it makes the decision a lot easier for anyone who can just glance at that table, look at the options and just see very clearly which one is the most red or the most green. So obviously you want to go for the most green option there. Now, a couple more tips when you do this. There may be some benefits, additional benefits that you haven't captured or don't really jump out as being apparent just by ragging the impact categories. So if there are any additional benefits you think your stakeholders should be considering, just put those underneath the options on the left-hand side and bullet point them, make them nice and clear. Very similar, if you have any additional risks that aren't called out on those impact categories, they don't really fit into those, just call those out as separate risks as well. So your stakeholders have got all the information they need to be able to make that decision. So that's how you do it. I hope that was a useful video, but this is a very, very useful tool. And if you get into the habit of doing this, you can quickly get together with your team, consider the options, get a paper together, put in your meeting with your steering group or whoever is going to be making the decision, issue the document in advance of the meeting so they've had a chance to read it and digest it. So hopefully when you come to that meeting, you can just try and get a decision made. One more point, very important, I almost forgot to mention it. Make sure you make a recommendation when you're presenting this paper. So have all your options and then have your recommendation. And it should be very obvious, as I just said, you've got your mostly green impacts, if it's the right decision, or the least red as possible. So you just make your proposal, they can go in, hopefully they just say, yes, we agree. And if they don't, they can have it out. Sometimes you might have to go away and get some more information before they make the decision, but usually if you've done the upfront work, it's all on that slide. They can make the decision there and there. And one more tip before I do go away, in the appendix of the pack, it probably is worth having any background information and any research that you've done that will supplement that first initial table. Okay, that's the video. I hope you enjoyed it. Please give it a thumbs up if you did. Hit the subscribe button for more videos like this one. And until tomorrow, please take care.